Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons where we try and take a darker tone with everything we do here. So if you like edgier kind of content, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. We really appreciate what you do. You mean the world to us. And a good big thank you to our friends at Dice Legion. Use the promo code Sinister and get 10% off all of your purchases. Both the links to both of those is in the description, as well as a link to the live stream game we are part of called Critical Failures. Tune in every Wednesday. It's 9 o'clock, 9:30 Eastern time. Check us out. There's a lot of great players. You get to see a lot of cool stuff if you're interested in. And with all that out of the way, we're going to jump into this week's video. We're talking about the Arcane Archer. The Arcane Archer comes to us from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. There's been a lot of hate on this actual subclass, and there's pretty good reason why. Usually I try to spin everything in a better, kind of more workable way, but I understand where a lot of people got a lot of disdain for the subclass. There have been really good concepts behind it. Treant Monk did one where they kind of like checked it out and really did the math on it, and it proved to be stronger than what people thought. But that being said, this has a lot of tricky maneuvers and understanding of what it does. So again, a lot of the things that people forget about subclasses is it's not just a standalone thing. You do have the base of the class attached to it, so your damage sometimes has to do a little dance between the two of those to kind of fit where it does in the actual scheme of things. So keep that in mind, especially with a subclass like this, because it's a little tricky to understand where its power comes from. Arcane Archer lore. At 3rd level, you learn magical theory or some of the secrets of nature, typical for practitioners of this elven martial tradition. You choose to gain proficiency in either arcana or the nature skill, and you choose to learn either prestidigitation or druid craft the cantrip. So this again gives the flavorful aspect of obviously being elven or having some sort of background connection to them. It's unique to the theory behind their elves are natural practitioners of magic. It's inherent in them, and henceforth they tend to be ranged and using bows and arrows and living in the forests and just using that as a very common kind of weapon for them, which is why a lot of them have proficiencies in the short bow, just for picking that species or race. Arcane shot. At 3rd level, you learn to unleash special magical effects with some of your shots. When you gain this feature, you learn 2 arcane shot options, and we'll go through this after I finish the arcane shot actual description. Once per turn, when you fire an arrow from a short bow or a long bow as part of the attack action, you can apply one of your arcane shot options to that arrow. You decide to use the option when the arrow hits, unless the option doesn't involve an attack roll. You have 2 uses of this ability, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a short or long rest, and you gain an additional arcane shot option of your choice when you reach certain levels in this class, 7, 10, 15, 18. Each option also improves when you become an 18th level fighter. So right off the bat, this is where a lot of people have a lot of issues with this. It's because you only get 2 uses of this per short or long rest. So if you do 2 short rests in a day, that gives you 6 uses, which really isn't that bad. But because it's such a short use, people tend to be immediately just disenfranchised by that right off the bat. But again, a lot of this has to come down to really intricate choices in what your arcane shot options are. So this is going to take some time to go through, so bear with me. Arcane shot options. The arcane shot feature lets you choose options for it at certain levels. The options presented here are in alphabetical order. They are all magical effects, and each one is associated with one of the schools of magic. If an option requires a saving throw, your arcane shot save DC equals DC 8 plus your proficiency plus your intelligence modifier. So a lot of people right off the bat, that's a great option for multi-classing into a Blade Singer if you didn't want to go Eldritch Knight, just in case you wanted to do something a little bit tricky or different. First and foremost, you get Banishing Arrow. You use Abjuration magic to try and temporarily banish your target to a harmless location in the Feywild. The creature hit by the arrow must also succeed on a charisma saving throw or be banished. While banished in this way, its speed is 0 and it's incapacitated. At the end of its next turn, the target reappears in the space it vacated or in the nearest unoccupied space if that space is occupied. After you reach 18th level in this class, the target also takes 2d6 force damage when the arrow hits it. This is something that you really need to kind of justify where you are in initiative order to make the most out of this. Again, you don't do any additional damage unless you're level 18, but you do take someone out of combat for an entire round. Because it happens at the end of their turn. Once they reappear, there is nothing they can do for that turn. You might be able to use it to save your party members, or you might just be in a situation where you kind of just had to just take someone off the board for a second to kind of refocus everyone's targets. The second option you have is Beguiling Arrow. Your enchantment magic causes this arrow to temporarily beguile its target. The creature hit by the arrow takes an extra 2d6 psychic damage, and choose one of your allies within 30 feet of the target. That target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw, or it is charmed by the chosen ally until the start of your next turn. The effect ends early if the chosen ally attacks the charmed target, deals damage to it, or forces it to make a saving throw. The psychic damage increases to 46 when you reach 18th level in this class. Okay, so this is a magical effect. If you're hitting a Fey creature with this, they usually have advantage against charms. Usually that's the case for most elves, as well as any kind of other Fey creature you might be dealing with. Outside of that, charming someone to not hurt one of your allies is a pretty big deal. It's one of the few instances that you can use charm very, very effectively. It does add additional damage to it. So this is one of my favorite options, but again, you have to be wary who you're attacking, because not only are Fey resistant to charm, that meaning they have like advantage against the saving throw, but undead can't be charmed, constructs, there's a lot of things that can't be charmed. But still, if you're fighting humanoids, I think some demons can be charmed, some fiends can be charmed, but check it out. It might be worth really looking into. Again, charm is one of those things that a lot of people tend to just stay away from altogether. Bursting Arrow. You imbued your arrow with the force energy drawn from the school of evocation. The arrow detonates after your attack. Immediately after the arrow hits the creature, the target and all creatures within 10 feet of it take 2d6 force damage each. The force damage increases to 46 when you reach 18th level in this class. There is no save. The target and everything around it, 2d6 force damage, period. No matter what. All the time. It's pretty self-explanatory. As a fighter, you don't really get a lot of opportunities to hit multiple targets. This is one of those circumstances where you can do. And early on, especially when you just get the subclass, 2d6 force damage is huge to add on top of whatever your arrow damage normally is. Enfeebling Arrow. You weave necrotic magic into your arrow. The creature hit by the arrow takes an extra 2d6 damage, and the target must also succeed on a Constitution saving throw, or the damage dealt by its weapon attacks is halved until the start of your next turn. The necrotic damage increases to 46 when you reach 18th level in this class. The real issue with the School of Necromancy is the Constitution saving throws. A lot of the enemies you fight will have high Constitution. So it ends up being a very difficult thing to make. That does not mean you get to just gloss over it and never use it. You should really try and use some of these abilities and some of these spells because they're just cool. If you manage to hit this, the weapon damage dealt by that enemy is halved. That's a huge bonus. And it's really across the board for anyone it's attacking. That can make a very big difference in a combat. It can really make something like a barbarian go significantly further because as its resistance to piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing damage, it now ends up taking a quarter of what that initial damage is. The caveat here is you have to use it against specific enemies because not every enemy uses a weapon to make an attack. Beasts don't do so, a lot of fiends don't do so, a lot of monstrosities don't do so. They usually have claw attacks or bite attacks, which do not work. Again, this is really what makes it campaign dependent for this kind of an ability. Really weigh your weight on it, but in a circumstance where you can fight something that is wielding a weapon, this can change it. Just can change the outcome, and this can make a big push to push things over on your side of the combat and kind of lean towards your better survivability, maybe someone wielding a maul is next to your caster, this can save their lives. Grasping Arrow. When this arrow strikes its target, conjuration magic creates grasping poisonous bramble, which wrap around the target. The creature hit by the arrow takes an extra 2d6 poison damage. Its speed is reduced by 10 feet, and it takes 2d6 slashing damage the first time on each turn it moves 1 foot or more without teleporting. The target or any creature that can reach it can use its action to remove the brambles with a successful strength check against your arcane shot save DC. Otherwise, the brambles last for a minute or until you use this option again. The poison and the slashing damage both increase to 46 when you reach 18th level. Here's a tricky thing about this. It is a strength check. You can give them disadvantage on strength. You can do that with Hex and a couple of other spells in the game. If they're poisoned, they have disadvantage on checks. So, gauge again where you are. If you can keep this thing to taking 2d6 slashing damage whenever it moves, that might be really, really beneficial to you. Again, this is really tricky to hit, because if you hit something and then it happens to be in melee with something else, it's not restrained. It can just keep going and attacking. But I do love that it has to use its action to attempt to remove the brambles. So it is foregoing a spell or an actual attack, which in and out of its own is totally worth it to just negate any of its offensive actions for a turn. Piercing Arrow. You transmute your transmutation magic to give your arrow an ethereal quality. When you use this option, you don't make an attack roll for the attack. Instead, the arrow fires forward in a line, which is 1 foot wide and 30 feet long, before disappearing. The arrow passes harmlessly through objects, ignoring cover. Each creature in that line must make a dexterity saving throw. On a fail save, the creature takes damage as if it were hit by the arrow, plus 1d6 piercing damage. On a successful save, a target takes half as much damage. The piercing damage increases to 2d6 when you reach 18th level in this class. If you are in a game where your DM is very tactical and has enemies hiding behind cover whenever they have opportunities to do so, this is going to be a great ability for that. In less tactical combats with where everything is kind of just out in the open, you won't see a lot of great uses of this as opposed to anything else you might want to take. But given that this does give you an opportunity to ignore cover and hit everything in a straight line, it's pretty good. A 30-foot long is kind of like the length of lightning bolt. So you can just kind of shoot straight through that, which is pretty good. It does, again, give you an option for AoE attacks. It's a little harder to hit, but you might find yourself in a tunnel situation where you might be really able to get use out of that. But again, it depends on kind of what kind of campaign you're in, as well as what kind of combats your DM is known for. If they happen to be tactical, if they happen to be setting up pillars and hiding behind stuff, this might be really, really worth it. Seeking Arrow. Using divination magic, you grant your arrow the ability to seek out your target, allowing the arrow to curve and twist its path in search of its prey. When you use this option, you don't make an attack roll for the attack. Instead, choose one creature you have seen in the past minute. The arrow flies towards that creature, moving around corners if necessary and ignoring 3/4 cover and half cover. If the target is within the weapon's range and there is a path large enough for the arrow to travel to the target must make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, it takes damage as if it were hit by the arrow, plus an extra 1d6 force damage, and you learn the target's current location. On a successful save, the target takes half as much damage and you don't learn its location. The force damage increases to 2d6 when you reach 18th level. So that's kind of a mouthful. Long story short, as long as it's within range of your shot, you could just send this arrow out to find it. And it has to make a dex save as opposed to an actual attack roll, so you might just be able just to land that hit, and then you know exactly where it is in case it hid, or if it jumped behind a wall, or started traveling somewhere. As long as it's within range, it will try and attack that target. It will always hit that target, whether it does half damage or full damage, depends on whether or not it made its save. And last but not least, Shadow Arrow. You weave illusion magic into your arrow, causing it to occlude your foe's vision with shadows. The creature hit by the arrow takes an extra 2d6 psychic damage, and it must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be unable to see anything further than 5 feet away from it until the start of your next turn. Psychic damage increases to 46 when you reach 18th level in this class. So Shadow Arrow is kind of your Nova ability. The way it's going to work for your benefit is you try and land Shadow Arrow on your first attack. If it fails the saving throw, and it's a wisdom saving throw, so you should be able to hit this pretty regularly, then it can no longer see anything further than 5 feet away. Then you kind of just launch into action surge and do everything else you can, because you have advantage because it can't see you and you are now an unseen attacker. That's kind of the way Shadow Arrow works. It's pretty straightforward. This is your best damage dealing option because it leaves you with advantage on your subsequent attacks. You always want to use this first. Okay, so here's where the issue is. Whenever you have this arcane shot ability, you only get 2 uses, no matter what. The additional shots you get is at 7th, 10th, 15th, 18th, which means you pick another arcane shot option. You don't get an additional arcane shot. So you're really stuck mitigating between what you have and what you need, and some of these can be very easily dependent on your DM as far as what kind of campaign they're in to kind of maximize their effectiveness. There's a lot of things you can do here. There's a lot of different options you can use. You have a cool couple of tricks, but it's intricate that you take the time to read through all of them, devise a strategy behind them, and talk to your DM in working that out. The easiest fix would just be doing something like just giving this proficiency bonus per short or long rest. I don't think that's so bad. I don't think it makes this overpowered. I think that's what a lot of DMs have been doing, just homebrewing. But that's your hardest part about this. It's just dealing with that very, very limited, I can only use this twice. And it doesn't... It does at least give you the option to only use it once you hit with an attack. So you don't have to guess if you say, oh, I'm going to use this, and then see if they happen to be able to resist it or make it afterwards, or just waste it because you didn't hit the attack, which is somewhat beneficial. But again, it's tricky. You got to kind of do your math on this and know what you're getting into. At 7th level, you gain Magic Arrow. You gain the ability to infuse arrows with magic. Whenever you fire a non-magical arrow from your short or long bow, you can make it magical for the purpose of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. Magic fades from the arrow immediately after it hits or it misses the target. You also gain Curving Shot. You learn how to redirect an errant arrow toward a new target. When you make an attack roll with a magic arrow, you can use a bonus action to re-roll the attack roll against a different target within 60 feet of the original target. So basically, once you hit 7th level, all of your arrows, you're just going to opt to make them magical. Once you do that, if you miss, you can re-roll that as a bonus action. Considering your range, you really don't have a lot of uses for your bonus action, so it might be something that you need to kind of mitigate. But again, this does give you that option to just use that roll to attack something else, so you might want to just kind of ricochet and maybe hit a target that was outside of your previous range that might be more valuable to you. At 15th level, you gain Ever Ready Shot. Starting at 15th level, your magical archery is available whenever battle starts. If you roll for initiative and have no use of arcane shot, you regain 1 use of it. So this means that you can have at least 3 per short or long rest. Usually, if you burn through that, you're kind of just using 1 per combat, which doesn't even really feel like a lot. But that's the hardest part about this subclass, is understanding how that kind of mitigates and works altogether as a whole to make this subclass viable. So now that we've gone through all of the abilities, how does this actually work? So you have to take into consideration the benefits of being ranged. And if you're ranged, you have opportunity to be more mobile on the actual field of battle. There's less risk involved. Chances of you getting surrounded is very few and far between. Because of that, your kind of longevity goes a little higher. It's a little easier to kind of run around and be further away from damage. All you have to do is make sure you're far enough away that you can't be AoE'd, and close enough that if you need to be near someone, you can get to them. Outside of that, range has a huge amount of benefits. It's why you see a lot of rogues running around with short bows or long bows, because it keeps them out of danger and they can still get sneak attack from it. Playing smart with range is really easy. All you have to do is kind of stay behind the beefier targets. There was a huge risk involved with going into melee, because sometimes you will just not be able to get out, and you are a primary target that way. That being said, being ranged, being a fighter, gives you multiple attacks, gives you action surge. So in the combination of that and the reduced risk, I think that's how this is kind of supposed to work out. Simply because you're taking less damage on average, because you're more tactfully placed in a better circumstance. You also have the ability to use numerous amounts of attacks in combination of action surge to make the most viable use out of your distance and continuously be able to move away. Because of that combination, I can see why you didn't have so many uses of this, because it's easy to rack up damage. If you just use 3 of these shots in one round, like at 11th level, and you hit on 2 of them, those additional effects can really be changing. They can definitely be powerful if you're fighting in the right circumstances. Not all of them. Again, like if you were using Beguiling Arrow, that's a big change in dynamics for the battlefield. If you're using Shadow Arrow, that's a big change in the dynamics of combat, because anyone else that can hit them standing outside of 5 feet is going to have advantage. Even people using polearms. That's the intricate part that we're facing here. That being said, I like the idea of how they pulled this with the schools of magic and made it very elven themed, and I think that feels right. And I've seen it a couple of times in games, and I really wasn't disappointed. I thought it was really intricate, because you still get to be a fighter, and the fighter is one of my favorite classes to play. With all that being said and done, we're going to bring this video to a close. If you made it this far, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. A big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much. If you're interested in joining the Patreon community with us, the link is in the description, as well as the link to our good friends at Dice Legion. Use the promo code Sinister, get 10% off all of your purchases, and check us out, joining us with our good friends at Critical Failures for a streamed D&D game. See some of the madness we get ourselves into. And definitely check us out. It's Wednesday, 9:30 it comes on, and then we update the videos onto YouTube after that. The link for that is also in the description. And thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.